In an interview before his death, John Lennon said he was really hurt by you, that you'd never mentioned in your autobiography any of the influence that he had on you.
George Harrison, the lead guitarist of the Beatles, had a complex and evolving relationship with John Lennon, the band's rhythm guitarist and one of its principal songwriters.
You know, and John was always keen to get out of his house because of his Aunt Mimi was kind of very stern and strict, and she embarrassed him. I remember going to John's house once when I first had met him. I was still at the Institute, and we were trying to look like teddy boys, which was like that style in those days. And I must have looked pretty good because she was like, she didn't like me at all. She was really shocked. She said, look at him, you know, who is this? Bringing this boy around to this house. You look at him, he looks dreadful, like a teddy boy. And he'd just say, shut up, Murray, shut up. I had no ambition when I was a kid other than to play guitar and get in a rock and roll band.
When he was a small boy, he told his mother not to talk about him to the other mothers. He didn't want nosy mothers knowing about him. Well, of course, for someone private to become one of the Beatles.
My mother was a real big fan of music, and she was really happy about having the guys around.
Their opinions of each other shifted over time, influenced by their personal and professional dynamics.
In the Beatles, I was the one who kept quiet and at the back and let the other egos be at the front. I don't really like to be the guy in the white suit at the front.
After the Beatles' breakup in 1970, Harrison's relationship with Lennon remained complicated. There were periods of estrangement, but also moments of reconciliation and mutual respect.
Well, are you in any sense in contact with each other?
The thing is, I hadn't seen him for so long. I mean, for all I know, he could still be there now, you know, because I didn't see him for 2 years anyway. And occasionally maybe send a postcard.
He said that you idolized him as a young boy, that you thought...
Well, that's what he thought.
And you didn't.
In the early days of the Beatles, Harrison greatly admired Lennon. John was seen as a mentor figure, and George looked up to him for his musical talent and leadership within the band.
Well, I liked him very much. He was a groove. He was a good lad.
As the Beatles progressed, tensions arose, particularly during the later years of the band. Harrison often felt overshadowed by Lennon and McCartney, struggling to get his songs included on albums.
But at the same time, he misread me. He didn't realize who I was. And this was one of the main faults of John and Paul. They were so busy being John and Paul, they failed to realize who else was around at the time.
He was the underdog of the Beatles. He was the one who had the most miserable time. Harrison was very much younger, in particular, than Lennon, and Lennon used to patronize him and call him that kid. That stuck for an awful long time. That's another root of this sort of resentment and this feeling of discomfort and rancor that he had as a Beatle.
You know, we were naive in those days. You see, a big change happened in 1966, particularly to John and myself, because a dentist we were having dinner with put this LSD in our coffee. Now, people who've taken that will know what I'm talking about, and anybody who hasn't taken it won't have a clue because it transforms you. We had great fun, and then we had great pain and misery together, and we had a lot of problems. As everybody knows, we went up and down and round and round. And at this stage of my life, I can look back on it and really remember the good things about it.
Harrison was critical of Lennon at times, feeling that John had been dismissive of his contributions to the Beatles and undervalued his talent as a songwriter.
Yoko sat in that very chair.
Well, I bet many people have sat in this.
Well, a lot of people have sat in it. But before we get to that, though, since we may run out,
let's get to something else.
When you, if you and John and Yoko do meet, though, you're not really gritting your teeth.
No, we're good friends. Yeah. I saw him last night, actually, at the premiere of Raga, which is what we should talk about, maybe.
Okay. But I mean, what did you say?
I said, hi, hello.
Do you have writers who think of these things, or do you just have them ready and you can just snap them right out like that?
We have writers home,
and
rooms full of them.
What did he come back with right away?
With,
high.
Yeah? Gee, this ought to be... was there more, or did that just go on? Do you regret any of it?
Get sad. I'm sad by, you know, I can't go and have a play guitars with John. But then I did that anyway. I did that for, you know, a long time. So, you know, we'll meet again somewhere down the line.
In an interview before his death, John Lennon said he was really hurt by you, that you'd never mentioned in your autobiography any of the influence that he had on you.
He was annoyed because I didn't say that he had written one line of the song Taxman. But...
Did you tell him that?
Well, I didn't, because he was already dead after that. But the point to that was that I also didn't say how I wrote 2 lines to Come Together or 3 lines to Eleanor Rigby. You know, I wasn't getting into any of that. I think in the balance, I would have had more things to be niggled with him about than he would have with me.
Maybe for the show, I mean, you could just say George was sick.
No, I mean, if he leaves, he leaves.
But what's the consensus? Do you want to go on with the show and the work?
Yeah, if he doesn't come back by Tuesday, we get clapped.
What condition was he in when he was in your car?
He was shot.
There were about 6 officers carrying him. He had a little bit of blood coming out of his mouth.
He was dead at the moment that the first shots hit his body.
After Lennon's assassination in 1980, Harrison was deeply affected. He expressed sorrow and paid tribute to Lennon through his music. Harrison's song All Those Years Ago, released in 1981, served as a heartfelt homage to Lennon, reflecting on their shared history and the loss of his former bandmate and friend.
I'd like to know where you were when John Lennon died.
I was in bed. I was in bed at the time in England, and I don't know, the call came through sometime in the morning, 4 or 5 in the morning. I didn't take the call. Olivia took the call, and she said, John's been shot. And I thought, oh, how bad is it? You know, I just thought maybe a flesh wound or something like that. But they said, no, that's it, he's dead. So I didn't know. I just went back to sleep, actually. I just, maybe it's just a way of getting away from it. I just went to sleep and then waited to see, you know, what it said the next morning. And he was still dead the next morning, unfortunately.
I wondered what you felt, losing someone so close to you for all those years.
It's like losing your parents or anybody you know and love. You know, all things must pass. But when it's taken in a violent way like that by somebody else, you know, it makes it very strange. He was very good. He was very good, and he was, in some ways, he was a slight genius. I mean, but apart from that, he was still just some guy like the rest of everybody else.
He was no angel.
He wasn't, but he was as well.
Was he?
In you. And I do believe in God.
Did he? What mental state was John in at that time? Do you know?
Well, I'd never seen him for a couple of years before that, but I had enough experience. Well, we all did. During the 60s, we had, you know, there was people putting stuff in our coffee, which gave us some crazy experiences, and when they stopped doing it, we started putting it in our own coffee for a bit.
2 girls wondering what you put in your coffee over there.
And, you know, but, you know, we had a lot of experiences. I know John was, you know, he knew who he was, that he was a soul that happened to be in this body for this period of time. And, you know, I don't think, it's just the method by which you die, you know. I mean, I think it's nicer if you can consciously leave your body at death as opposed to just some lunatic shooting you on the street or having a plane crash, something like that. I think it's unfortunate the way he went out, but it doesn't really matter. He's okay, and life flows on within you and without you.
How are you doing, Johnny?
George Harrison's opinion of John Lennon was multifaceted, marked by a mix of admiration, frustration, and deep emotional connection. While their professional relationship was often strained, particularly towards the end of the Beatles, Harrison ultimately respected and valued Lennon for his contributions to music and their shared experiences. Their relationship, like many close partnerships, was complex, but underscored by a profound mutual influence and lasting legacy in rock history.
Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right.
So, it's strange, but it's just another one of the strange things that's happened in this life. You know, our manager died, our road manager was shot by the LA police. So many of our friends died through the years, and, you know, everybody went on drugs, everybody went to the Himalayas, everybody got divorced. You know, it's just a very concentrated kind of life.
It's all right.
The whole thing has been like this, really, in one way or another.
It's all right.
Just sort of get used to it.